The Ontario government passed legislation late last year that it said would help get more housing built more quickly. Included in that bill was a reduction of the fees charged to developers on some units. That revenue is not small change for cities and towns which were accustomed to receiving it. Now, several municipalities say they'll have to hike property taxes on existing taxpayers, sometimes by a lot, to make up for that lost revenue. Let's hear from two mayors on this, starting in Waterloo, Ontario, with Mayor Dorothy McCabe. And here in our studio, John Taylor, Mayor of Newmarket and Chair of York Region's subsidized housing provider. That's called Housing York. And your worships, both here and in the city of Waterloo, we're delighted to welcome you to our program tonight. I got to do this every time we talk housing on this program, and that is, in the interest of full disclosure, we'll note that my brother is a home builder in the Hamilton area, not in either of these municipalities. So we just put that on the record in the interest of full disclosure. Mayor McCabe, to you first. How much are property taxes in your area expected to increase next year as a result of the provincial changes?
Thanks, Steve, and hello, Mayor Taylor. Pleasure to be on TVO. Big fan of the show. So, to your question, our staff are estimating that over the next 5 years, starting next year, that property taxes will increase anywhere between 7 to 10%. That's 23 million to 35 million over 5 years, just to manage the loss of development charges funding that we normally would collect. So that's a significant hit to our tax base.
And okay, Mayor Taylor, how about for you?
Yeah, a similar number. It's interesting because I've seen such a wide range of numbers out there, but actually we're in a similar range. We think it's going to be around the 10% mark, but I think everybody agreed there's so much uncertainty and so much not much clarity yet. So the number could be slightly lower, could be slightly higher, but that's kind of a working number for now. But it won't. But we made the decision to not put it into this budget process, so it won't impact the taxpayers this coming year, but we'll start to have to address it after that.
And you are convinced that the taxes will have to go up that much as a result of these provincial changes and not other factors?
Absolutely. And in fact, if anything, that's I think we're right now working on numbers based solely on the DC impact and not things like the downloading of Conservation Authority or regional planning, et cetera. It might cause us to staff up. So I think if anything, there's more impacts that we haven't fully understood or measured.
Can I understand that your situation as well, Mayor McCabe? It's because of the development charges and the disappearance of them that these numbers are going to go up as much as they are? You can't attribute it to anything else?
Absolutely. No, this is a direct cause and effect. And in fact, to Mayor Taylor's point, there will be additional, we don't know yet, but there'll be additional costs on the operating side of the ledger as well. And in addition to the Conservation Authority impact, but also, there'll also be impacts in terms of some of the other legislation that the province has been bringing in, particularly we're in a two-tiered municipal structure, and so they've recently indicated that they're going through Bill 39 that they're going to download or devolve the planning authority from our regional government to our municipalities. So that means that we will have to hire more planning staff and staff with various levels of expertise to manage that. So in addition to losing development charges, we are going to have to, unless there's changes, we are going to have to hire more staff in order to manage some of the new planning responsibilities we'll have. So it's kind of a lose-lose in terms of the money situation on both, with a number of the things that are coming.
Now, Mayor Taylor, let's just put this in perspective, because of course people watching this program who live in Toronto are accustomed to hearing about budgets that are in the multiple billions of dollars.
Right.
So when you say you're going to be out 25 to 35 million bucks or something because of these changes, that doesn't sound like all that much. But what does it mean to Newmarket?
Oh, it's very significant. To put it in perspective, a tax increase, if we have to increase our budget by about $700,000, that's a 1% tax increase. So for the Toronto viewers, just imagine your taxes, the kind of numbers we're talking about, the $15 to $25 million range impact translate into a tax increase at that. Do the math; it's significant, and so it's a very big hole. And by the way, I want to add, it's not just DCs; it's parkland fees. That's the two things we're calculating on. And so it's very impactful. And the bottom line is, if we're all saying it's going to impact taxes, because the only other option is to not fund the growth properly, and that's a pretty People might not notice that in 2 years or 3 years or maybe even 5 years, but 7, 8, 9, 10 years out, it'll be very noticeable in every community if we stop properly building and funding and building communities.
So Mayor McCabe, let's just give us a sense about what it would mean to the average taxpayer in Waterloo. If you had to raise taxes to make up for this lost revenue because the development charges are no longer going to be there, do you have a guess as to how much, either per month or per year, additional taxation people would have to pay, your ratepayers?
Oh, yeah. Our staff right now are estimating it would be anywhere from, again, there's some questions that still need to be answered, but it would be anywhere from about $20 plus per month. So in addition to what our property taxes already, at a rate our property taxes already are. But I mean, a lot of this is about funding, but I just want to put it, I mean, can be a little bit abstract. So I just want to be sure that people understand that when we're talking about property taxes and the things that we use to build, to use what we use this money for, we're talking about libraries or library expansions to accommodate the new people coming to our communities. We're talking about, new fire stations. We're talking about parks. We're talking about recreation centers. Waste, the sewer and wastewater mains that go into the grounds and roads. So these are things that people use every single day in our communities. So the money's big. The money's a big problem. But I just want to make sure that it's not abstract for people. This will directly slow down or mean that we can't, for a number of years, build the kind of amenities that really make a community livable and the reason why people, move to our communities.
Well, okay, but Mayor Taylor, let me put the sort of devil's bargain that the province has put on the table here, which is to say the idea behind the bill and the idea behind removing these development charges on home builders is that they want to take every possible impediment out of the way that would somehow stymie or stifle or prohibit the construction of new homes, which everybody agrees we need. And I guess the question to be asked is, are these tax increases modest enough or an appropriate enough sacrifice for your municipality to have to make in exchange for getting much more housing much sooner?
Oh my, okay. So there's so many things I can say here, and I think there's so many that are important to be said here. But first of all, we have to start with the premise. This is about increasing supply. And if we're only going to increase the supply of single-family homes or townhomes at $1 million and up each, I'm not sure what housing affordability problem we're solving. I'm on board. I'm on board for increasing supply. We need to increase supply, but it's hardly the full picture. And they said early on this was the first step. There was going to be more around housing affordability. We need to have a real conversation about policy directly related to housing affordability at all levels. Now, is this going to be, is this a price to be paid for this? I just don't, to increase supply, I think that the real question is if it is the right, let's set that aside. If it is the right price to be paid, who's paying it?
Your current ratepayers.
Well, they're going to now have to pay it. It could have been, as it was, the developers, and frankly, that's who it is, because everybody knows that when a developer puts their houses in the market, they sell it at whatever the market will bear. They don't reduce it by $20,000 because there's a discount to the DC, right? So that's going to happen anyway. So the developers were paying it. The province could have, with their surpluses, paid it themselves. They could have just said, we're going to reduce them and we're going to fund you directly for that, or we're going to fund the reductions directly. And put their commitment behind it financially.
So
but to put it to municipalities that we own 60% of the infrastructure, municipal infrastructure, we own all infrastructure in Canada, 60%, and we get 9 cents on the dollar tax dollars. Our reserves are dramatically underfunded. The suggestion that we have all this money in the bank is nonsense. So I can argue and debate the fact of whether this is actually tax dollars well spent for the supply issue, but let's just put that aside. Why are municipalities who are underfunded paying for this when the government that enacted it and it's running surpluses isn't paying for it?
Okay, Mayor McCabe, let me put the same question to you, which is to say, if your ratepayers have to pay, let's say on average $20 more per month because these development charges are disappearing, but at the end of the day, you get a lot more purpose-built rental in Waterloo, is that a good trade-off?
Well, I mean, again, similar to what Mayor Taylor said, I mean, we really need to look at the outcomes. And of course, I mean, we want more housing built. We need housing of every type and make and model for people of every ability, age, and stage in their life. And there's no question that we've been very clear on that. And in fact, Waterloo currently has 22,000 housing units at some point in the development pipeline. The province, through the Bill 23, is asking us to build 16,000, and we're saying we actually have more in the pipeline. So it's not a question of whether or not we're willing to build. Part of what the challenge, and is really puzzling for me with Bill 23, is that in fact it will actually slow down our ability. Getting rid of the development charges will slow down our ability to build new housing developments, because, for example, in one area, North Waterloo, there's area that we're looking at developing, but in order to, if we did get all the approvals in place, it requires an upgrade to the wastewater management pumping station. It requires roads and infrastructure that go underneath the ground and then all the infrastructure that's required and needed in a new subdivision. If we don't have the development charges to build that, we simply cannot move ahead with that development. I mean, that's just the bottom line. So there's things we don't disagree with the government about the need to build more housing, affordable, supportive, and attainable housing. But this methodology is actually going to slow us down, and that's what I find really confusing and challenging. And the other thing is that we also have housing developers in our community, and I'm sure in communities across the province, that have all the development approvals they need, but they're sitting on land and they're sitting on those approvals. And so we need something in Bill 23. And hopefully it will come in when they do the regulations piece of it, to say developers who've got all the approvals and permitting in place, you've got, I don't know, a year, 2 year, whatever the time frame is, and if you don't build that, we're going to pull those approvals back. This is sort of all stick to the municipalities, and we need a bit of stick on the developer side for some of those who are sitting on approvals.
Can I add to this? Sorry,
please.
It's so. Quite passionate about this, but to piggyback on that, first of all, so York Region has 50,000 draft plan approved units, right? We had for a provincial approval, a wastewater treatment plant that would service 75,000 homes, and it sat waiting for a minister's signature for 7 years. It sat for the entire first term. If you want to shorten our approval process by 3 weeks or 6 weeks. And they sat on the ability to move forward massive development for 4 or 5 years.
You know why?
Why?
Yeah.
I think it was the politics between whether it was going to go south or north and who that impacted the most and who would have the most headaches as a result of it. But what I really want to say is this. You started the question by saying, but if that got you more purpose-built rental, that's different. This is just supply. It's not saying what type of supply. I'll tell you right now, if this program was funded by the provincial government and was targeted at only purpose-built rental, because that's the one actual category of housing where the development charge, a reduction, could make a difference to something getting built or not built. The pro formas there are
especially
challenging.
Especially 3 bedrooms. Sorry to interrupt, but especially 3 bedrooms.
Yeah. So I would say, I'll just say this bluntly, if that was targeted where it should be, because we're going to have a massive shortage of rental housing in this province over the next decade or more, and it was targeted at that and funded, I would have stood on stage, put my arm around the premier and light off fireworks. I mean, we need that so desperately and so much, and that could have been an effective policy intervention that could have made a real difference in Ontario. This has many, many challenges to it being effective or successful.
And can I just add to it too? The other part that I find puzzling about Bill 23 is that the province is saying that they're going to put a cap on affordable housing. I mean, the affordable housing piece needs a bit of definition. I'm going to assume they're meaning the affordable supportive housing, which we need certainly in our community in Waterloo Region, and lots of other communities, but they've capped it at 5%. So I'm very puzzled about why they would do that when we need affordable housing, we need supportive housing, and we also need attainable housing.
Before we move on, we need to understand the distinction between supportive housing and affordable housing.
Well, so in my mind, affordable housing means like true affordable housing that is 30% of someone's income, and it may include like some support from either the regional level of government or, some kind of caseworker support for someone with mental health or addictions issues. So that's that. I'm kind of lumping a supportive and affordable together because there's no clarity on the definition that's been provided through Bill 23.
Mayor Taylor.
I'll just be very blunt. All of the legislation that's related to this and otherwise, this has very little to do with affordable housing, unfortunately. I mean, maybe that's the intention, but it really will have very little impact. This is an area I've been involved in for 15 plus years. And this is not going to make that kind of difference. In fact, it's going to set us back dramatically. I think one of the pieces that's under-recognized in the media and amongst elected officials is that this legislation, Bill 23, is removing our ability to collect DC charges for supportive housing, for social housing. Toronto Housing Corp or York Housing York. So Housing York, which I chair and have chaired for some time, will now not be able to collect DCs. We have in our DC bylaw currently a collection of about $200 million over the next 20 years to build housing for people who desperately need it. Those are the most vulnerable in our society. That I think there is huge support for this, and I think the public are going to be outraged when they hear that. On one hand, we're saying, "Oh, we're going to address housing affordability by building a lot more units," but we're taking away our ability as communities to build supportive or social housing for those most in need. I think it's extremely problematic, to put it politely.
Here's another view. Heather Malik writes in the Toronto Star. I don't know how much you two read her. I have a feeling you're not going to love this, but Heather is a provocateur, if nothing else. The numbers are simple. A 7% increase in municipal taxes in Toronto, that means the average homeowner will pay a total of $233 more. I'd like to help, but my personal shoveling will do nothing to advance a downtown water main. But if everybody pays a little, those tubes will shoot beneath our streets. Taxation is huge value for money. Tax us more, Mayor Tory. Okay, Mayor McCabe, what do you say?
On the tax us more, maybe people in Toronto do need to be taxed more by their municipal government. I'm not sure. But I know, certainly, I think at a time when we're facing people across Canada, across Ontario, certainly and beyond, we're facing really high inflation rates. We're facing affordability challenges. I mean, look at some of the stories that have been done recently about the cost of food. So at a time when our citizens and our residents are facing affordability challenges like we haven't seen in years, we need to think really carefully as municipal leaders about what our property tax increase is going to look like. So I agree that taxes shouldn't be a four-letter word. Taxes are what makes our community livable and a place that people vibrant, and place where people want to come. But we also have to be really cognizant of the external forces around us as well. And I will also note another big concern just on that point is that because of the changes the province has made in rental housing guidelines, and like right now, landlords can raise rents by 2.5% per month or per year. But in extraordinary circumstances, i.e., when municipal budgets go to beyond 3.75% per year, that opens an opportunity for landlords to charge above the board rental increases, and that's a problem too. So we're facing budgets and challenges in municipal government and in other governments like we've never seen before.
Well, landlords are not represented in this discussion here, but I think they'd say if they were, being able to charge 2% increases on rents in a world where inflation's at 7 or 8% is not a great deal for them. But anyway, let me, Mayor Taylor, I want to come back at you on something here because, you represent a part of the province where, very happily, the average homeowner has seen a great increase in the value of their homes. And some might suggest that if the value of the home has gone up a great deal through nothing that they've particularly done other than just been in the right place at the right time, okay, shouldn't you pay a little bit more in taxes accordingly?
Well, I think that's the wrong debate. And I think even with the Toronto Star article, we could debate whether taxes can go up or there's room for taxes to go up and whether people should pay more taxes to live in the society they want to live in. But at the end of the day, you should only raise taxes if you're confident you've got a policy or a direction related to that tax increase that's going to create a community benefit or good and an outcome. And I think that this direction of increasing taxes, if we're going to increase taxes by that much, let's make sure people are getting value for it. And this direction is not value. These homes were going to be built anyway. The development community is not, as I said, going to reduce housing prices because of a reduction in DCs. And housing supply will be increased perhaps not nearly by the limits of the targets, but housing affordability, supportive housing will not get addressed. And the thing that people care most about when you raise their taxes municipally, and this is a world we live in, is their community. And we're not in the business as mayors of building homes or building 1.5 million homes. We're in the business of building communities. And that means you've got to have fees for parkland and build parks and trails and community centers. And this is what was being said before. And so I don't mind having the debate about raising taxes if we're providing a benefit or a good that the community will value and see value for. But this is not that.
All right, Mayor McCabe, is there a better way to incentivize the creation of either more homes or more purpose-built rental other than the removal of the development charges? That's what the province has settled on. What would you say?
Yeah, it's a good question. And as I said at the start, we are not opposed to working in collaboration with the provincial government and our regional authorities and the developer community. I mean, we all need to be working together on this. As Mayor Taylor said, municipalities don't build homes, we build communities, and we try to set the conditions that make our communities a really desirable place to live and want to come and work and play. Yeah, I mean, in terms of like building more homes, we are going through our planning departments to make sure that it is streamlined and that we aren't duplicating efforts. And sure, there's some things we're again in a two-tier municipal structure where plans that we approve at the city level need to go up to the region for their review and approval. That does add extra time. Maybe, I mean, those are places potentially that we could look to reduce some of the time. However, the caveat there is that lower tier municipalities like the City of Waterloo don't have some of the planning expertise around like hydrological studies and things like that. That expertise is at the region. So where to find, I mean, some of these, like I said before, we've got housing developments and approvals in place for some developers in our community who are sitting on approvals and who could have finished building out one of our last subdivisions 5 or 6 years ago, right? So there has to be something in Bill 23, and again, I hope it comes in the regulations. There has to be something in there that gets the development industry to construct new units at the pace that we need.
Let me save 30.
We need shovels in the ground.
Last 30 seconds to Mayor Taylor.
So I answer your question. Directions we could have taken that would be more effective are policy directions.
Yeah.
2. The first one I've already mentioned, purpose-built rental. Focus this entirely on purpose-built rental, and I'm all in. Number 2, if this was about housing affordability, truly about housing affordability, I don't support taking land into the Greenbelt, but if you do, and if you're going to do it, philosophically, you believe it's the right thing to do, why are there not density targets tied to it? Why are there not transit-oriented development requirements tied to it? And why, if you're handing billions of dollars over to landowners in one legislative change, why were there not housing affordability criteria and targets directly tied to that land? Your land is coming to the Greenbelt. Your land's now worth hundreds of millions, if not billions more. You will build 25% affordable. You will build it transit-oriented development, and you will build in certain density levels that are higher than, and right now I'm not aware of pretty much any strings attached to that.
Those are really good questions, which I hope to put to the housing minister if he comes here soon, which we're trying to get him. So we hope that's going to happen. Dorothy McCabe, the Mayor of Waterloo, John Taylor, the Mayor of Newmarket. We are delighted to have both of you on our program tonight, and we'll just add one little proviso at the end here. A note that next week we're going to return to this issue, affordable housing, as part of our ongoing partnership with ROMA, the Rural Ontario Municipalities Association. They've got a conference coming up. We're partners with them in that, so stay tuned.
Fantastic.
Thanks so much, you two.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.